So after months and months of there being absolutely no interest or no trade market for Zach Lavine, dating all the way back to last season when both sides had actually agreed to find him another home, we finally have a report that there is significant interest in Zach Lavine from a contending team that is wanting to upgrade the talent on their roster. That team, of course, being the Denver Nuggets. This according to the Athletic's Sam Amick and Tony Jones. Now, of course, like every rumor, report, or gossip around the league, I don't believe it until I actually see something happen, as we've seen so many times, far too often in NBA history, so many rumors that never come to fruition. However, the reason this is significant is because it quite literally is the first time we have seen a report come out citing Zach Lavine being the front runner in a team's interest on the trade market. And it's also not just coming from some random fan or an uncredible reporter. Sam Amick is one of the best in the business as an NBA insider, and while I don't know Tony Jones all that well, I do know that he's been in this industry for a long time, covering many teams throughout his career. And then the other reason I feel like this holds a little more weight is because Zach Lavine and the Denver Nuggets actually makes sense from a fit standpoint alongside Nikola Jokic to give them more floor spacing, an off-ball shooter, but can also create for himself, one of the better catch-and-shoot shooters in the league to go alongside the best passing big man in the game, hell, arguably the best passer in the league, period, not just among bigs. Yeah, that would be a big upgrade for the Nuggets as it relates to fixing some of their current issues. That said, does a trade like this make sense for the Bulls, and what could the potential return even look like in a deal with the Denver Nuggets? Well, let's talk about it. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I've already tweeted about this quite a bit since this report came out, so some of what I'm saying might be a bit redundant if you happen to follow me on Twitter as well. But when it comes to any potential trade deal that involves Zach Lavine going to the Denver Nuggets, there is no scenario where Michael Porter Jr. would not be included in any trade package coming to the Chicago Bulls. Like, I've seen a lot of Bulls fans talking about how they don't want Michael Porter Jr., how that would be a terrible trade for the Bulls. They would just have to make another trade package with the Nuggets work. That's fine if you don't like MPJ, and I completely understand the concerns there as it relates to his injury history, his inconsistent play at times, and the fact that it doesn't really do much when it comes to relieving the Bulls of any salary that one would hope to achieve by getting off Zach Lavine's contract, considering Michael Porter Jr. is making $35.8 million and still has 2 more years left on his deal after this season, although it is worth noting that the final year is not fully guaranteed. But regardless of how you feel about Michael Porter Jr., there isn't a scenario where he would not be included, because the Nuggets aren't trading Jamal Murray, and they're certainly not trading Nikola Jokic. And those are the only other 2 players who would be able to match or come close to matching Zach Lavine's salary. Like, I know a lot of people just want draft capital and or young players with high upside and not take back much salary in return to give the Bulls more cap flexibility, but it just doesn't work that way. And especially when up until this point, there has been zero interest in Zach Lavine, and now you finally have a team wanting to make a deal. You have to work with what the league trade rules give you. And with the Nuggets being a first apron team, they can't take back more salary than they send out. And with only 3 players on their roster making that kind of money that Zach is, Michael Porter Jr. is the one that would be included, plain and simple. Now, of course, it is possible you could get a third team involved where MPJ goes elsewhere and the Bulls take on a bad expiring contract and some draft capital in return, but I find that path unlikely given there are limited teams, contending type teams, that would be willing to give up draft picks to bring in Michael Porter Jr. The other thing I've heard people say as well, if the Bulls are going to do any deal where they trade Zach for MPJ, then they would need some draft picks to go with it in return. First of all, the Nuggets don't own any second round picks. They've traded all of those away. And while they have, I believe, 3 first-round picks that they actually can trade, they're not giving up a first-round pick for Zach Lavine, if it also means they're giving up Michael Porter Jr., because taking on Zach also carries risks as well. He's older than MPJ, his contract is even larger, and as we've talked about before, as great as he is a flawed star, and it's the reason why teams have been wary of trading him in the first place. So with all that being said, what could a trade deal look like between the Bulls and the Nuggets where the Nuggets end up with Zach Lavine? Well, we already know Michael Porter Jr. and Zach would be swapped, but it can't be a straight swap. As I mentioned, the Nuggets cannot take back in more salary than they send out, so they would need to include another player or players. And while I think the most common trade package I've seen includes Zeke Naji, I actually threw in another player of my own in Julian Strawther, while the Bulls also send the Nuggets Torrey Craig, who would also fit on their roster to give them some more veteran experience and a hard-nosed player to give them a little more depth off the bench. For the Bulls, Strawther gives them a player with some upside, fits the timeline and direction as he's only 22 years old, only in his 2nd season in the league, but he's already shown a lot of progress from his rookie year. Zeke Naji, a player who was pretty high of a prospect coming out of high school, first round pick in 2020. He's been very underwhelming since entering the league. That said, it is possible. A lot of it is because he was drafted to a team looking to win championships and hasn't really been given ample opportunity in development. He's only 23, maybe in a rebuilding environment, some of that potential could be unlocked. That said, if he doesn't work out and he doesn't really amount to anything, well, then you have his salary eating up your books for the next 4 years. Now, he's not on that large a contract. He's only making $8.8 million this year, and it's a descending contract, but under contract for the next 4 years for a player you might have a hard time trading down the line. And then for Michael Porter Jr., I look at this a few ways. One, 6'10 shooters who can move on and off the ball, can crash the boards, shoot it well, do not come around very often. Since coming into the league, he's always been the number 3 option. If he were to join the Bulls, he would instantly have a bigger role, potentially even being the Bulls' number 1 option, and maybe he thrives in that role and breaks out into a star. A lot of people thought he was going to be a star in this league. He was a top recruit coming out of high school, expected top 3 pick before he got injured. And while the injury risk is valid, that's a valid concern, he did play 81 games last season, and so far this season he's played in every game, averaging 18.5 points per game, 7.1 rebounds on 51% shooting and 38% from 3. Dude isn't a scrub and can play when he's healthy. I think the biggest question here is, by trading for Zach, for Michael Porter Jr., what does that mean for the Bulls' chances of keeping their pick? Or that return in general, if you include Strother and Najee. I mean, it probably won't be that much of a difference. The Bulls aren't going to be that great of a team still. The problem is they've already won too many games to really put themselves in a position where they can guarantee to keep that pick. But we'll save that topic for a different day. But what the Bulls could do is try and flip Michael Porter Jr. after acquiring him in a trade before the deadline or even during the offseason. I don't think that's going to be some crazy return because of all the risk I mentioned with Michael Porter Jr. and his contract, but he is younger and his contract is a little more tradable than someone like Zach, and you might be able to get some draft capital in the form of second-round picks or heavily protected first, and maybe a younger player with some upside. I haven't really dug deep into what that would potentially look like since we're learning about all this now, and you can't try and do a mock trade in the trade machine for a future trade that hasn't happened yet to see what packages would work for Michael Porter Jr. being flipped by the Bulls, but more so just saying that's an option. And probably an option that would make the most sense for the Bulls is it would give them a better chance of keeping their pick while also shedding salary and maybe getting some draft capital in return for Michael Porter Jr. But anyway, we'll see if any of this actually goes down. I will not believe it until I see it, but an intriguing development nonetheless. I would love to hear what you guys think. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.